Hello everybody, absolutely great that you're interested in my interview I'm conducting with Ahmed Abu Artema from Rafah, Gaza. He is a writer and a peace activist and is one of the founders of the Great March of Return, a series of demonstrations starting in 2018 demanding the collective right of return for Palestinian refugees. And for sure, he is one of our speakers of our online event entitled The Renewal of the Palestinian Movement.A Transnational Unity from Below. And I think that's a quite a wonderful starting point to ask Ahmed about the protest movement that re-emerged in the last month or so in Palestinian communities in Ramle, in Haifa, in Lid, in other cities, and for sure in the West Bank, in the Gaza Strip, East Jerusalem, and the Palestinian diaspora in Jordan, Lebanon as well. So really great that you are joining and listening to my interview. Ahmed, absolutely great. Thank you really so much for being here and for sharing your thoughts with us. My first question goes back to the issue of the Great March of Return and its significance, existential significance for the Palestinian movement and for sure also for the protest movement over the last years or so. How do you assess now the experiences of the Palestinian Great March of Return at the Gaza-Israel border, and how does it contribute to today's movement against the colonial power?
The most important development in the idea of the March of Return that it brings the Palestinian people back to the return, to the root of the problem. The Palestinian people say that our basic cause that we are refugees. We were expelled out from our land. And the problem is not relating to some details, to the siege, to the electricity, to our daily life. Yes, this is important, but this is not the root of the problem. The root of the problem that we are, as Palestinian people, we were forced to expel out from our land. We became refugees. We are under the occupation. We are fighting since 70 years more for our liberation and for our freedom, and for the refugees to return to their land. In the diplomatic level, maybe they speak about the both sides and about the how to create a state on 1967 border and like this. But when you speak with the ordinary people, with the simple people, with the elderly, with the youth even, what do you think as Palestinian? He will say to you, I'm a Palestinian, I want to return to my home. As example, I'm as Ahmed, I want to return to Ramle village where my grandfather was expelled out. The March of Return started, and I called on the people for this idea. This touched their hearts, and they say, yes, this is exactly our dream. This is exactly what we want to say. And I want to mention something. My first call for the March of Return was on February 2011. A few days after Hosni Mubarak collapse in Egypt. So that inspired us as Palestinian youth. We cannot focus on how to improve our daily life without return to the root of the problem. The root of the problem that the colonial project here in Palestine. This is one example. We are in Gaza as example. We have the gas field in the sea, and if we exploit this, we can solve the problem of thousands of the youth in Gaza. But we cannot arrive there. We cannot use our gas. Why? The simple reason that because of the Israeli control. So this is the root of the problem. When we end the root, when we solve the root of the problem, so after that everything we can solve it.
Thank you really so much for your answer, Ahmed. I just want to go back to the Nakba, the flight and expulsion of more than 750,000 Palestinians in 1948. And the significance it has. How do other components of Palestinian society in the West Bank, in Jordan, in Jerusalem, in Israel, in Lebanon react on the Great March of Return? How do they understand their own activities related to the Great March of Return? And how did the Great March of Return inspire today's movement?
Good question. When I called for the first March of Return in 2011, the react was not only inside Gaza, but in Lebanon, Syria, Jordan. The react there were stronger than Gaza. And on May 15, 2011, we saw tens of thousands of the Palestinian refugees from Lebanon, from Syria, from Jordan. They arrived, and also from Gaza and West Bank. They arrived to the border and they said, we want to return to our homes. So this is the popular dream, the popular demand that the refugees they want to return to their homes. I want to mention something. I visited Jordan as example, and everyone he met me. They were embracing me. Why? Because I came from their land, and many of them said to me, if Palestine borders will be opened, we will leave everything in Jordan, and we will return back. Yes, the Palestinians are weak. We cannot compare between the power of the Palestinians in politics or on militarily and or on the international community support with the Israeli power. So Israel failed to remove this idea and this dream from the millions of the Palestinians. We are still believe deeply that this is our right, and we will return to our homes. Israel, from the first day after its establishment on the year of Nakba, they tried to remove remove the history, to remove everything that can remind the Palestinians of their rights. I remember from my personal life when I was a child in the first Intifada, we were not be able to carry the flag of Palestine to fight for our identity. The Palestinian people feels that their identity, their existence under threat. Israel tried to make us as the indigenous people in the United States. Our existence is resistance. It's not necessary to fight by weapon, but when you stay here I mean in Palestine, when you stay here, when you live your daily life, as we saw in Sheikh Jarrah, when your residency in your home is a resistance, because they want to uproot you and to end your existence. So yeah, we believe that history can be changed, and it will be changed, the history, and the peoples are weak today, they will be strong tomorrow.
Thank you really so much, Ahmed, for elaborating on the Palestinian history of the struggle, the definition and the definition of a Palestinian national movement and its very rich legacy. And for sure we could talk about the whole issue of sumud, of how the Palestinian movement over the last 100 years or so started to re-emerge out of the different defeats. I just want to pick up one issue you mentioned, and this is about the whole issue of unity. A lot of Palestinians and others as well are talking today, given the experiences of the last month or so. So is this a new unity we can observe?
Shows how the Palestinians are very united and how they have one struggle. This is what Oslo tried to change it when Oslo Accords focus on Gaza Strip and some parts of West Bank, and it ignored the Palestinian refugees and ignored the Palestinians inside what's called Israel. They are one people and they have one struggle, and they sure have the same culture, the same feeling, the same history, the same fate, everything. And this is the most important thing in that confrontation, because in the same time Gaza, West Bank, Jerusalem, the Palestinians inside what's called Israel, and even the Palestinians in Lebanon and Jordan who came to the border. And I think this is one of the reasons that made pressure on Israel to end this, because they expected if that battle extended to the next Fridays at that time, that the refugees from Lebanon and from Jordan can come more and more, and this will be very difficult for the Israeli colonial government. So yes, I think what happened in May was the example, and it inspired the Palestinian people that yes, we can do this in the future, and I think this will happen in the future.
Thank you, and all the best. Thank you so much for listening to this interview with Ahmed Abu Artema, and I hope we all have a quite interesting time to reflect on what Ahmed mentioned, what he elaborated on, and I think that's a necessary component for the future when thinking about a just peace. Goodbye.